Hey out there, YouTube community, JR's Live Journals, signing in on December 20th of 2022. Yep, I haven't really been uploading a whole lot as of lately. I've been fairly busy with stuff, but since I've got the time today, I figured I'm gonna today review a TV show. I'm not going to do a movie review or a gaming video or anything like that today, but I'm going to be. Today, I just decided maybe I'd look back and reminisce about a science fictional TV show that came out in the 90s, like in the mid 90s. 1993 is when it was released, and it was, of course, another idea of the creative mind of Gene Roddenberry. I mean, it was, of course, his imagination and everything, and it was, it was in 1966 when we first discovered this. I mean, I wasn't alive at the time. I wasn't alive until like 21 years later, and that was back when television was a big of a thing. Not only did you have Star Trek at the time, you had Batman Adam West 1966, you had Bewitched, you had other shows along with that, I Dream of Jeannie, Gunsmoke, Bonanza, the list goes on. But as time went on, they needed to do more special effects, continue other arcs of different crews for these space travelers that are known from the United Federation of Planets, which in 1987, fall of 87, they debuted the successful, just as lovable and likable as the original series from 66, Star Trek The Next Generation, starring the awesome Patrick Stewart as Captain Picard, and, we all are familiar with that one too. And this next one I speak of is actually my favorite Star Trek series ever, which brings me to the heart of the matter of this video, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Now, unlike other Star Trek series, on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, they're not always on a ship or doing explorations or any of that. They're on a space station that's just beyond a wormhole outside of the planet Bajor, where the Bajorans were another alien race introduced to us in the Star Trek world with Star Trek The Next Generation, with Ro Laren being one of the Bajorans that were introduced to us then. Well, anyway, I'm going to go on ahead, but, not only did we have Bajorans in this series, or the actual Bajoran homeworld, which is just below the space station, but we also had more contact with Cardassians, and we also had more Ferengi interaction. We even had like a Ferengi who was a main character on the show, Quark, who ran the bar on the station of Deep Space Nine, known as Quark's. And that'd probably be a pretty cool thing to check out if you were touring the station, if it really existed. That'd be like one of my go-to places. I just hope that the food on the menu would be good, other than just the root beer. Anyway, a little beside the point there. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, yeah, but like I said, they weren't just always on a ship and exploring. I mean, there was also a lot of war involved in this show of Star Trek and all that. Although the wars and everything and the action didn't really take a very big part until like late in the 5th season, which I'll talk about a little later in this review. But we of course, you even had the commanding officer of the station at the initial stages of the show. He wasn't a captain from the get-go of it. He was a commander, like Riker was on the Enterprise D at the time, and even Spock on the original series. Sisko, Benjamin Sisko, from New Orleans, Louisiana on Earth, he was still a Starfleet commander at Rake, although he was transitioning into captain at this point already. So at least it made enough sense that he was assigned to command the station despite not being a captain just yet, and all that. But that was one kind of another uniqueness about this Starfleet series, is that the first 3 seasons had a commander as the boss of this place rather than a captain. That added some originality in many ways, even though I kind of find the first 3 seasons of this show to be a bit more depressing and kind of slow paced compared to like the 4th season up until it ended. And they also were, of course, supposed to be along with, the other modern Treks of this century, of this generation, they each had 7 seasons, even, the Next Generation had 7 seasons. This one we're talking about, Deep Space Nine, also 7 seasons. Voyager had a whole 7 seasons. It's like, and during those 7 years, these shows remained on the air. They had to fill an hour time slot. So if you don't include commercials and all that, you're talking at each of these, say around 45 minutes an episode, if that. And, yeah. But yeah, it really was a wonderful ride when it came to TV history, Deep Space Nine. Although, like I said, a lot of people seem to have mixed opinions about this show. And they say it's not nearly as good as the original or the Next Generation or even Voyager. It seems like a lot of people who like Deep Space Nine either like it or Voyager, not really both. Although I am a pretty big Voyager fan myself to a degree, even though it's even more different than Deep Space Nine on account of the fact that they were even far out of the Star Trek universe in comparison to Deep Space Nine. And, but like I said, they were on, on syndicated stations, where, depending on where you lived, I'd say it was, to fill in an hour time slot. And, we, of course, like I said, start out with Captain Sisko being a commander and being assigned to command Deep Space Nine. He has his, rivalry, so to speak, with Picard. Because, while Picard was assimilated by the Borg is what cost Commander Sisko the life of his beloved wife, Jennifer, who he still holds a torch for throughout the remainder of this series. Even Cassidy Yates, who he ends up later in the show, can't really do it for him 100% and just can't replace Jennifer. And that's just one of the kind of concepts of this. And, yeah, that happens, and, of course, Patrick Stewart reprises his role as Captain Picard, as even the Next Generation was still in its run, for another 2 seasons, even as this aired in, like, the very beginning of 1993. And, I even hear the upcoming 3rd season of Picard. Sisko is returning, according to what many sources have been revealing to us. And I take it a lot of the interaction of Picard and Sisko, when Sisko descends and returns, is probably going to really be reflected off of this rivalry of the 2 captains, because Picard and Sisko really were at odds. They just spoke different languages, they weren't on the same page and everything, and they just had a lot of aspects to both their personalities that just caused them to clash and everything. And, yeah, that was the kind of thing about these 2 captains. And, when it comes to science fictional movies and shows, they all have their known rivalries, like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Vader, and just to name one. And, yeah, it's like, you have, like, and, even Han Solo and Boba Fett, it's these rivalries that kind of make the show intriguing and make people, like, want to watch it, That's how it got its start, and then as the rest of the first season, came on, as, there was even, like, a later episode where, the doctor there, Dr. Julian Bashir, who was the chief medical officer on board Deep Space Nine, who was a wannabe, womanizer. He was a wannabe womanizer on board the station, and he at least kind of like got pretty intimate more than like anybody else on the whole crew. That's kind of what made this medical officer stand out compared to all the others. Kind of like with Bones in the original series, it was his hot temper that made him stand out as a doctor, as well as the one on Voyager. The emergency medical hologram Mark 1 was unique because he was an artificial intelligence medical officer on board his Federation starship. And, yeah, well, you know, and of course you had Jadzia Dax, who was on the first 6 seasons of the show, who was also in this little game. And Kira Nerys, the first officer on Deep Space Nine, even though she ain't really with the Federation per se, but she's with the Bajoran affiliations. And you have this little girl who's playing a science fictional hopscotch game in the first season, Ala Moraine. And they have to do it the right way or they don't get further into that. But, you know, other than this, and even like, of course, you know, Q did make an appearance. You know, Q, he's a character, you either love him or you hate him. I mean, I'm actually a pretty big Q fan myself when it comes to Star Trek. He's one of my top favorite Star Trek characters and villains of the show. Anyway, I had a little bit of an itch there, but like I said, you know, Q, he was a very popular, compelling character in the series. In fact, in many ways, I think he tried to be a friend of Picard and all these people rather than just the annoying nuisance he turned out to be. Because at the end of the day, Q really isn't generally annoying like that. He ain't really naturally like that. Because he really just wants to get all these people prepared for what's ahead of them. Because sometimes I think many of these Starfleet officers are just getting too ahead of themselves. Q kind of realizes how arrogant many of them could be and everything. And how controlling, even to the point of some of them maybe even being a little vain at times. Q just kind of realizes this, and he's kind of trying to watch out for them. It's almost like he's their guardian angel to some extent. And anyway, yeah, I mean, Q did make that appearance, and, you know, Vash was in the episode with him, which dates back to a couple episodes of The Next Generation, where Vash and Picard cross paths a couple times, and this one in particular, the episode of The Next Generation, Season 4 Cupid episode, where they get into the Robin Hood story, fairy tale and everything, because of Q putting them in, like, a part of the continuum where it's like Robin Hood. And, yeah, that episode of The Next Generation is relevant to the Q-less episode of Deep Space Nine, which was released approximately 2 years later. And, yeah, but yeah, it was pretty interesting when Q was on there. I mean, he was always looking out for Vash and everything. Kind of being a little jealous when Vash tried to date Dr. Bashir and vice versa, you know, getting in the way. It kind of... But, yeah, it's just, that's just the act Q puts on, just to promote people, but at the same time motivate them to be more careful and all that. That's just kind of my theory. I don't know if any of what I'm kind of saying about Q really matches here, because I don't really think Q really means any harm in many of this stuff. And, which also leads me to this conversation about the main antagonist overall of Deep Space Nine, the Cardassian, Gul Dukat, who was in charge of the Bajoran occupation. And, you know, when he was in charge of that occupation, things were a little bit less stressful and tense for the Bajorans and everything, and people still frowned upon Dukat despite that. And he actually respected his adversaries as well as he did his allies and everything. He was quite a bit more of a diplomat than Captain Sisko, the emissary himself, was. It's like, you kind of look at Dukat for all this, most of this series, and you kind of think, man, how is this guy evil? You know, it's like, you don't really see much of his flaws, really, until after his daughter's killed in the 6th season on the episode called Waltz. It was up until that very episode where we really saw the kind of cool, chill, calm guy Gul Dukat actually was. He was kind of more like an anti-hero rather than a main antagonist. I mean, I don't think anybody really would have guessed at all that he was like as bad as any of those other Cardassians up until the episode Waltz. That's like where he really started getting a little bit more out of control and everything. But yeah, I mean, he definitely had cravings for, you know, political power and everything too. Kind of like the Emperor and Count Dooku do in Star Wars. It's politics was his thing, being bureaucratic, blah blah blah. And that's yeah, but like I said, you know, Gul Dukat was a very interesting character throughout most of this series. And after the episode Waltz, up until they get to the Bajoran fire caves, he was a little bit dull without any depth from in between that gap. It's like we just didn't really have the same guy as, like, you would have thought he was like a different character with the same name and played by the same actor, design similar, all that. But yeah, I mean, that's just the thing, you know, he's got such a powerful pheromone charm that he can get many females to do his bidding, like go out with him or whatever. I mean, he even did it to Major Kira Nerys' mother, you know, like in Occupation Times 2. And, you know, he really, you know, can be that convincing and manipulative of a guy, but he's also resourceful. He's just that amazing of a character in this show. Another character I really liked from this show was another Dominion character known as the Vorta Wayoon, played by Jeffrey Combs, which Jeffrey Combs also played Quark's cousin Brunt as a Ferengi, and he also played another character in a season 3 episode that just was a guest character. I don't remember. I mean, I just kind of remember bits and pieces of it. I mean, because the third season kind of started a little slow, and it was that beginning of the series where, I mean, you had a few kind of awe-inspiring moments, but overall it just kind of lacked a bunch of excitement and all that compared to, like, the past tense and going on forward. That's like kind of like even compared to like the 4th season and all that, where everything just started getting more adventurous and passionate around that station, and it just wasn't as gloomy and all that. And there was even the second episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I think it was called Past Prologue, I think. It was the second episode of the first season. Amazingly enough, this was supposed to be Garrick's, you know, the other Cardassian who's on the crew's side, but he's kind of more of a neutral character in many respects. But anyway, yeah, it's Garrick. And anyway, like I was going to say about Garrick, the second episode of season 2, Past Prologue, I think it was called, was supposed to be his only appearance in the entire series. He wasn't supposed to come back at all. But the reports were in, a lot of people loved Andy Robertson's performance as the Cardassian Garrick. They decided to make him stick around throughout the whole entire series, and he came a long way too. And yeah, because I can imagine, you know, had he had not come back, we never would have figured out his first name was Elam. And it's also good to know that, you know, he still had a lot of character depth throughout the entire show. He had such an intense relationship with Dr. Bashir. He would always meet with him for lunch and all that, and they'd get into analytical discussions, so to speak, and just all that, you know. I mean, Bashir had Garrick's back, unlike his rival, Dukat, who was completely disgusted by him. And, you know, Garrick even later has a forbidden fruit relationship with Dukat's daughter, Tora Ziyal, later in this. And, it's just another thing that kind of made things entertaining and interesting for him. You know, Garrick was another character we really loved from the show. And, you know, just a lot of the non-Starfleet officers in this. It's like Deep Space Nine even kind of had you wondering, is it these Starfleet officers that are really the good guys, or are the aliens more moral in their behavior and antics? You know, it just makes you really wonder. It has a lot of questions causing you to be asked. But this show, you know, I mean, like I said, you know, in my opinion, it was the best Star Trek show ever, along with The Next Generation. It kind of, in a lot of ways, was kind of like the expanded The Next Generation, because Worf is finally a main character in the fourth season, and we have the former reoccurring character, Chief Miles O'Brien, who I hear is getting his own show like Picard did. And, Chief Miles O'Brien's one of my favorite Starfleet officers in the entire franchise. I'm hoping I'll probably get to watch the new O'Brien show, but you never know about the future. And, just all that. And, that's just the whole thing. It's like, yeah, he's getting his own show, but yeah, anyway, Chief O'Brien was in both The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, as was Worf was. So, like I said, Deep Space Nine was an extended version of Star Trek: The Next Generation to some extent, I would think. Even though it had quite a bit of a different universe and sort of vibe to the show, and yeah, you had that in there, and even Keiko and Molly were with Chief O'Brien on the station, as they were with him on the Enterprise. And even featured a guest appearance from Commander Riker, although it turned out to be the duplicate Thomas, even though he does share practically the same life and everything. It's like they're practically just one and the same. I mean, well, what happens to one will probably affect the other here, but yeah, I mean, that was supposed to be kind of like a teaser for Voyager, since the William T. Riker duplicate was also with the Maquis, which the first debut pilot episode of Voyager starts out with Chakotay and B'Elanna Torres on the Maquis, and getting attacked by the Kazon, more or less, or some race. Yeah, been a while, but yeah, that's like I said, it kind of teased Voyager. And this being said, I think it would have been awesome if Commander Data from The Next Generation even made a guest appearance in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I mean, he didn't make a guest appearance in Deep Space Nine, but I think it would have been outstanding if he did, though. He definitely probably would have worked out on a Season 2 episode, I would think. But it would have also been pretty cool because, of course, on The Next Generation Season 6, Dr. Bashir made a guest appearance on The Next Generation and interacted with Data. So, of course, Data would have maybe at least a short-term reunion with Bashir here, but he would probably be interacting with Odo, which I think a lot of people probably would have killed to see. Odo, he's like the security officer on board Deep Space Nine, but he mostly is on to Quark more than anybody, and even at the first several seasons, he's on to Nog just as much, Quark's nephew, and the son of his brother, Rom. Rom, he was quite feeble-minded, although he was pretty careful and cautious and not nearly as impulsive as Quark. Even though Quark claimed he was looking out for Rom, I think for most of the time, I think it was Rom that had Quark's back and was more worried about him and wanted what was best for Quark, even though Quark kind of thought it was his duty, since he's older than Rom, that he should look out for him and all that. And that's just the way Rom was. But seriously, though, Rom, I mean, he was like an alien version of Shemp from the Three Stooges. I mean, he was just so adorable in every way, and whenever he made a mistake, and all that, it was just laughable and stuff, kind of, somewhat. And, yeah, Max Grodenchik, who actually played Rom in Deep Space Nine, played several Ferengis in The Next Generation. In fact, there's even kind of like that Take Me Out to the Holosuite episode, when he was that bad at baseball. He actually played baseball when he was in high school, and he never could play that bad enough. He was that good at it, they made him pitch and bat with his right hand. Because they didn't realize how good he was, and his regular skills would have interfered with the role part, so they had to compromise by letting him do everything with his left hand. And he even, like, bunts, and they win against the, Vulcans. But yeah, it's pretty... Yeah, that was actually the 7th season, too, where we no longer had Jadzia and Dax. Yeah, it was just another memorable moment I'm recollecting on of this series. I really like this show a lot, so I'm going to probably make this video a relatively long one. So I can, like, just recollect moments of one of my favorite shows. So I've already named several episodes. You know, it was actually pretty interesting in the episode The Wire where, you know, Anabran Tain reveals to Dr. Bashir Garrick's first name was Elam and everything. And even earlier before that, he comes in contact with this little boy, Cardassian, named Rokul, who was raised all his life by Bajorans, and he learned to live and act like a Bajoran, and he hated his own kind because of it, because he was adopted at such an early age, even though his biological father does take custody over him later. And he just didn't want to live amongst his own kind. It's just sad. That's just the thing. There's a lot of sentimental moments in this series. You do have, like, some good Ferengi tales in this series. Like, you know, when Nog gets accepted into Starfleet Academy, there's this episode of season 4 called Little Green Men. And, you know, starts out with Nog and Rom having a going away sale and everything. He even sells a tooth sharpener to Worf, who was still new to the station and even the show at the time. Yeah, he ends up, buying Rom's tooth sharpener. See, I mean, Nog, his tooth sharpener. See, that's the thing about Nog. He was definitely your unconventional Ferengi, and he wanted to be even more unconventional by proving that he could actually go to Starfleet and pass, which he does. I mean, he just never really wanted to live like any typical Ferengi because he realized that they were overly flawed with their cravings for business and profit and all that. Nog didn't want to live like that. And, you know, even his father was a big goofball, too, who also was another, maybe arguably, non-conventional Ferengi, to some degree. And, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's but yeah, it's just the thing. And, you know, even, like, after, you know, like a year after Nog becomes a Starfleet officer, Rom decides to work in engineering with Chief O'Brien on Deep Space Nine. Actually, not in the 5th season. It was in the... actually, it slipped my mind for a minute. It was actually towards the end of the 4th season on the episode where Rom forms a union because he doesn't like how Quark treats him, Lita, and the customers. Rom does end up romantically involved with Lita later, after Lita got out of a short-term relationship with Dr. Bashir. And, but yeah, like I was saying, you know, that Little Green Men, it started out like that. But anyway, now on to the point of the episode. The Ferengis then start their journey to Earth so they can escort Nog to the Academy until they get, like, pulled into some sort of, like, time warp thing in the middle of space. They end up in the year 1947 on Earth and everything, and yeah, they've time traveled way back, like in the middle of like the Cold War, World War II days, so to speak. And it's like yeah, they're all of a sudden, you know, like in the past and everything. It's pretty impressive because they also discover what 20th century humans were like and everything about. And boy, I tell you, it just completely made Quark real, like, go with the sound of amazement, you know, that there were, like, people that they could actually make true first contact with, and that Nog's like warning his uncle that he can disrupt the timeline, cause a whole bunch of bad stuff to happen to change the course of history, even the Federation. Maybe they wouldn't even exist in that time, it's just... It's good to know that Nog had a pretty good cautious view about what could happen here. And even Odo shapeshifted into like that dog thing, and turned out he was spying on Quark and everything, because Quark was going to do more of that illegal activity once he finished dropping off his nephew at the academy. And yeah, it's like, even when they do have like those universal translators and everything, because before, even these 20th century humans, to them they talked like the Martians from Mars Attacks. And they were thinking that maybe they were Martians at first. Get right down to it, Ferengis, they look like more like they would be Saturnanians rather than Martians. Their whole thing about profit and perseverance and everything like Saturn. But, a little off topic there. Yeah, but luckily enough, they were able to get back into their own time, successfully transport Nog to the academy. Yeah, that was another memorable moment. Even the episode Our Man Bashir, where Julian Bashir creates a holosuite program where he's like James Bond. He can do whatever he wants with his crewmates and everything, such as date Kira Nerys. Man, she looks so fabulous in that dress. And, even Elam Garrick, was there to support it and all that. He even made Captain Sisko the adversary of this little scenario. Even his friend Chief O'Brien, who you think he would have probably made on his side and all that, but no, he was one of his enemies. Yeah, it was another pretty interesting episode, but the only problem with this episode was what made its plot and its importance is that Bashir and Garrick were like trapped inside the program and everything, and the other crewmates had to like come up with lots of diversions and everything to like get them out of there, which they ended up at the end of the episode, of course. And yeah, it's a lot to jot down. I mean, I can't go into pure detail with a lot of this stuff, but that was another pretty interesting Deep Space Nine moment. And of course, you even have that episode where there's that this running a mock changeling at the Starfleet headquarters. Sisko has to wear a dress uniform, and he runs into that admiral and all that, and they're even has moments with his father, who's played by Brock Peters, who plays Joseph Sisko, who's a Creole cook. Even has a Creole restaurant right there in New Orleans. And, it's also pretty amazing because even Captain Sisko himself can cook a lot of that Creole cuisine and everything. Just amazing with that. And, this changeling boy, he even, shapeshifts as Chief O'Brien at that one part. Sisko even had a feeling it was him, which it obviously was, because he knows it would have took him longer to get to Earth, even on a runabout from Deep Space Nine, and it's like, man. But yeah, that was a pretty amazing moment of Deep Space Nine. And of course, you have the episode where Weyoun is back and him and Dukat join forces. The Dominion War practically has gone underway. The Cardassians and Dominions are one. And even have Weyoun, drink alcohol drinks and everything, and apparently he's got an immunity to poison, and he says it works good when he's a diplomat. That means he obviously probably couldn't get drunk or have any sort of alcohol effect to his body. And yeah, you had that. You even had that other episode of season 5 where Jake Sisko and Nog are like trying to get a baseball card because Jake wants to give his father a gift. And the guy that has the baseball card, when he's negotiating, Jake offers a handshake and says, "You have any idea how many germs are transmitted through a handshake?" Which now people would probably be saying when they watch that guy obviously traveled to 2020. Which in 1997 we would have had no idea that the COVID and pandemic and all that was going to hit us. It's just incredible how much the world's changed. And we now have all these streaming services. They don't have to fill time slots, so they can make the stuff in as long as they want, as long as it ain't that much over an hour. It's incredible. And of course, the episode after that is when everything gets underway. Gul Dukat gets Terok Nor back, becomes the commanding officer all over again, which leads into season 6, where he's officially in control for those first 6 episodes of the show. And even the Federation gets into their little misadventures when they're on the Defiant instead of the station, because it's Terok Nor now. It ain't Deep Space Nine for the time being, and Gul Dukat's running it and everything. And at least Odo's still able to enjoy his little chief of security thing going on and everything. And Quark realizes he doesn't get as much business out of the new Cardassian Terok Nor crew compared to what he did with the Federation. And they fight for it, even Quark, he gets Kira Nerys and some of the imprisoned old good guys who tried to fight against the Cardassians and the Dominion here. And he tricks the guard, the guard Cardassian with Aspirat Souffle. That was a very memorable moment right there. Only for it to, later, feature even the demise of Gul Dukat's daughter, Ziyal. Which is really, really very, very emotional moment for the show, because Leggett Damar knew she was a traitor, so he killed her. It wasn't really a cold blood thing, but they had to get off that station. But then Gul Dukat becomes prisoner, which led to the episode Waltz and everything, with Gul Dukat becoming more dishonest. And had more Dominion War action. But another really memorable episode was another season 6 episode, and it's probably one of the finest of all time. I mean, even Avery Brooks himself directed it, who was the captain of the show and big starring character, Far Beyond the Stars. Very unique episode, because there's like an alternate reality of the 1950s what features the Deep Space Nine cast. And instead of Benjamin Sisko, he sees himself as the famous 1950s newspaper article writer, Benny Russell. And he just basically makes the world around him Deep Space Nine and everything. And even on the episode Lies in the Sand, I mean, he even sees the 1950s version of Damar, and they're like in a mental hospital because after what happened at the end of this one, he becomes hospitalized. Yeah, Leggett Damar, he was kind of Gul Dukat's little right-hand man for a while. He becomes Wayun's right-hand man later in the series, but that happened to him, though, and he was played by Casey Biggs, who kind of looks like the guy that played Doctor Doom in the Fantastic Four movies. Julian McMahon, who was also in that Nip Tuck show. It's somewhat of an uncanny resemblance. He actually does seem to favor him. I mean, maybe not uncanny, but he does favor him to quite some degree, though. I was stretching it when I said it was an uncanny resemblance, but yeah. Oh boy. When it came to other Deep Space Nine season 6 moments, I mean, season 6 and 7 had a lot of relation because you do have the Jackpack, 3 human ammunites like Dr. Bashir, genetically enhanced human beings, and it's also pretty amazing because they like predicted the Dominion War and everything, and they had quite a bit of a history of what was going on with Dukat and Damar and the Princess being Ziyal. It's like, yeah, it's like amazing how they could just flat out figure this out. Yeah, and you even had like the mute Serena. She didn't really talk that much, even though she was genetically enhanced. You had Lauren, who was played by Hilary Shepard Turner, who also played Divatox in the Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. It's like, man, who would have thought you'd have like a Power Rangers star on a Star Trek TV show? It's kind of beyond me, but it worked out though. It worked out for the very great good, and she was very attractive at the time. And even the woman that played Divatox on Turbo, the Power Rangers Turbo show, she wasn't nearly as good looking as Hilary Shepard Turner. Amazing. And yeah, you had her and you had Jack, who was the short-tempered kind of one of the bunch, and then you had Patrick, who was the most eldest, but at the same time, he was very emotional and sensitive. He seemed to really like Miles O'Brien because when Chief O'Brien had to fix a comfling in their little study, they're like having a party and everything, and Patrick tries to put on a little party hat on Chief O'Brien. He tells him no thanks, and and then Patrick, after Miles, Chief O'Brien declined Patrick's offer to be a part of the fun they were having, he breaks into tears, and all of a sudden Dr. Bashir doesn't really understand what's going on. What did you do, Chief? And then Chief O'Brien goes, nothing! And what's wrong, Patrick? He doesn't like me. And then Chief O'Brien replies, well, sure I do. I tell you, Chief O'Brien was just a wonderful character in the series, and all that. I mean, there was even another episode of season 4 earlier before this where he, was a part of something that Dr. Bashir made and all that, and he, sees himself in, a prison. He had, a cellmate named Echar, and it has an effect on his emotional health and everything. Yeah, and even in the vision, because of the food and everything, he didn't want to really share it with Echar, or he thought Echar was being selfish with him, and he didn't want to share it, and he realized he was saving it for another moment thrown in right there. But yeah, Chief O'Brien, yeah. I mean, I can't blame Patrick for being attracted to him in such a way. And yeah, you did have that. You later in season 6, this is where it really gets cool. There's another branch of Starfleet that does everything they can to protect the forces of Earth and the United Federation planets themselves. The Hush Hush Incognito Section 31. Luther Sloan was the first Section 31 agent to come into play here. Only we're under the impression that he's like a Starfleet officer working for internal affairs, and he questions the entire Deep Space Nine senior crew about illegal activity and all that, and Dr. Bashir is the one he's most fascinated with, and it's like supposedly he's accusing Dr. Bashir of not being loyal, about doing illegal stuff for Starfleet and everything, and going against their code. So many accusations, even making references to early episodes about those amulets I just talked about the third episode of the fourth season when he tried to do medical stuff when it came to dealing with the Jem'Hadar. And, yeah, you had that. And, yeah, it's like he's like being interrogated all the time. And then he even runs into Weyoun for a little bit, and he's under the impression that Sloan and Weyoun are working together to continue to frame him so he can get executed or something. And see, earlier in the episode, like comes here in a minute when the senior crew of Deep Space Nine are pointing fingers at him, he tries to console Chief O'Brien, who backs away, and since he had an injured arm earlier that morning, it wouldn't have healed that fast. And then apparently it was just a whole big program, and it turned out that Sloan was in fact a Section 31 agent, and he wasn't with Internal Affairs of the Starfleet. And yeah, seeing as the fact that Dr. Bashir, despite being a medical officer, he did have a lot of ways of being a spy because of his mysterious personality and such. It's like, that just gave him Section 31 potential here. So, yeah, but Bashir does decline here. But there is an episode where he comes very close to pretty much officially joining it. But thanks to an argument with Admiral William Ross and Dr. Bashir, it was out of the question. And yeah. So, some more good moments. I mean, it was just cool that this was the Star Trek series that introduced Section 31, although it would appear in like future adaptations of Star Trek, like Star Trek Enterprise. I even hear it's made an appearance in like Discovery and other Treks that are on Paramount Plus, which I've not really watched or given a chance yet. Although I did, however, watch Star Trek Picard. I watched the first 2 seasons so far. Picard was actually a pretty incredible show. I mean, it was a different kind of Trek, but I mean, the fact that it's darker and everything, and they don't have to fill time slots, they can just do whatever they want with it. Even the guy who wrote Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, Akiva Goldsman, was the guy who wrote the script and screenplay for this series. So yeah, you got to give it credit there too. And I can't wait for season 3, which Deep Space Nine is going to have like a very big part in this upcoming Picard season, and Voyager is too, because I hear there's going to be Deep Space Nine and Voyager references both. And yeah. And lots of aspects of the Dominion War was pretty incredible though. And you even had the female changeling who even went to extremes to try to kill every single Cardassian on that very last episode. But it seemed like after Cisco had defeated Gul Dukat, the remainder of that episode was just like, it's becoming even more depressing than how it started out. And the only reason for all this, like Chief O'Brien getting that job at Starfleet Academy, Odo going back to his home world. Well, of course, Worf leaves, but Worf, of course, would appear again on Star Trek Nemesis, which was released 3 years after What You Leave Behind, the series finale of the show. And even in the middle of the show's run, even in First Contact, insurrection, Worf came back to join the Enterprise crew because he was a part of that crew too. I mean, he had two different families, which kind of may have expanded Worf a little bit as a character. Because it seemed like even like in Deep Space Nine, compared to the Next Generation, Worf had a little bit more of a more depth to him and all that. You know, I mean, it seemed like in the Next Generation, although he was the chief of security on board the Enterprise, for the most part, other than his relationship with Alexander, who was a kid in the Next Generation, then a teenager in the season 6 episode of Deep Space Nine. He didn't even want to become a warrior, but he grew up to be one. It's like, imagine that. But yeah, even like apart from all this, though, it's like, I mean, he had a few Next Generation moments thrown in, but only if it like involved Klingons and all that. I mean, it seemed like, you know, unless it was like a episode that was like kind of evolved around him in regards to the main story, he just didn't really seem like want to really mingle with a lot of the people on board the ship. Even his relationship with Deanna Troi seemed pretty useless, and it was a whole lot more interesting when he dated Jadzia, even ended up marrying her, only for her to be killed by Dukat, because Terry Farrell quit Deep Space Nine so she could be on the sitcom Becker, which she was later fired from, and Nancy Travis replaced her there, just as Nicole DeBoer played, you know, she would replace Terry Farrell as Ezri Dax, you know, in terms of her leaving as Jadzia. And yeah, but in any sense, though, this was such a unique series. It's also good to know that we just had so much expansion to the Trek world thanks to this show, I think, and just all that. I mean, it's definitely worth a go. If you want a good science fiction show to watch, I would highly recommend Deep Space Nine. I think I'm going to probably pretty much conclude it here. There's so much I'd like to say about this, but I just don't want to have like it's been even more awkward pauses than I already have now. But I think I've pretty much jotted down many of my favorite aspects here of the show, pretty much. I mean, I've got a lot more, but I just don't want to even make this any longer than what I have, because I've also got like more work to do around my apartment and stuff too. So I'm going to end it on this note here. But overall, I give this show definitely a 9.7 out of 10. It is a wonderful Star Trek and science fiction show. You've got to watch it anyway.